that goes around, and you're in a theater in the round. So down here is a patient in blue, and there's a table over here, and there's two men in white jackets, and up there are the medical students that are going to learn something today. The fellow over here, closest to the patient, he's the doctor, and then he's got his assistant over there, and the doctor says to the patient, he says, I'd like you to explain to my students what your medical condition is. And the guy goes, and the doctor waits a few seconds for that to sink in. He says, maybe you could try and be a little better with your pronunciation. And the doctor says, maybe it would be best if you showed my patients what's wrong with you. So he sticks his tongue out. Now, you have a little device under your tongue. I don't remember the name of it now, but it keeps you from swallowing your tongue. Unless you're Gene Simmons, he can tap his forehead with his tongue. He doesn't have, okay. It's under here. The guy sticks his tongue out, and what he doesn't know is that this is a planned exercise, and the doctor reaches behind him, and his assistant gives him a set of forceps. And as the guy puts his tongue out, he helps it. When they used to look down my throat in a cancer treatment, every time I went in there, they can really yank that thing. It can come out farther than you think it can. And he pulls it out as far as he can, and he takes this clamp, and he clamps it behind the guy's tongue. Now he's got a bridge across his face, so his tongue is not going anywhere. And then he reaches behind him, and he gets a scalpel from his assistant. And the fellow had a mushrooming tumor on the end of his tongue. And if it wasn't removed, it would continue to grow and eat him to death. And the physician surgically removes the end of his tongue. And then he unclamps the clamp, and the guy does the first moonwalk backwards in a chair. And that's how they practiced medicine back in the mid-1800s. Why would a doctor do that? Without announcing what they're going to do. I mean, how many of you ever had a surgical procedure and was awake for it? A real surgical procedure, you know? Okay, that's cool. I could give you one you want to go to sleep right away.
The reason why I believe that they want to go ahead and doing large in the round is so for younger students to know and learn. It goes all the way back to teaching.
But the point is, he didn't say anything to his patient. The physician knows best. If you don't remove the tumor, it's going to grow. In fact, it's going to eat you to death, literally. That's what cancer is about. It's not a disease. You don't catch it. It's your body's autoimmune system not stopping overeating with some of your cells, and they literally just will eat you to death. Or they'll eat you up in some vital organ, and when they make the vital organ useless or inoperable, your body will fail.
I was just going to say they assume like the patient shouldn't have to know because they don't know anything about this.
They don't know anything about it. And how many of you would volunteer for that without? And look, they say, why didn't they anesthetize them? They didn't have anesthesia back then. What they had was alcohol. C2H5OH. And your body will immediately take as much water out of you as they added what you put in your face. We're 74% water. So what's left is C2H4, and that's ether, and that will kill you. If you over-anesthetize someone with ether, it can literally kill you. You can literally drink yourself to death. I've had to be at funerals of people who drank themselves to death, literally. So it's not safe. So many times they would just, if it wasn't in the facial area, they'd give you a stick or something, bite on it, and there goes your leg out of the military. You're wounded in combat, there goes your part, and we'll cauterize it and everything else we have to do. And they'll save your life. So that's an example of physician knows best. They're trained. They're designed to give you more time on the planet. And to their best ability, that's what their aim is whenever you walk in the office. If you have something that's life-threatening or down the road could reduce the number of time on the planet, they're going to do the best they can in their best understanding to extend your days of life on the planet. Everybody get me? Okay. So the Hippocratic Oath the medical oath, is based on the paternalistic principle that doctor knows best. The Hippocratic Oath is what we call a code of physicians. It has a principle: the physician pledges to benefit his patient, and the physician pledges to protect his patient from harm. So it's got two principles to it. They're not the same. Notice the second one says the physician pledges to protect his patient from harm. That does not mean from pain. No pain, no gain. So friends of mine loaned me their cottage, and the Chinook were running out in the lake, and we went out there, and he's got a boat that's sitting out there up on the riser, and they're not around, and it's Thursday. I have to go to work on Friday, but the family's going to be out there with the boys and the wife, and my wife looks at me and she says, do you know how to lower that boat? And then it turns out it had what we call a trolling engine on it. Trolling engine is, here's the boat, and then it's got this aluminum bar that's long, and it's got maybe a quarter horsepower, half horsepower, and you drop it down, and it just slowly moves the boat forward, and you put your line in with the jig on it, and just, you don't even have to jerk it, just the waves in the boat, and the bass will come up and think that's food. And the problem was, this thing was locked up here, and I couldn't figure out how to drop it. And so by Friday morning, I asked the wife to go out there. Her dad was a DNR officer, Department of Natural Resources. He's been around this stuff. She's grew up with it. I said, can you figure out how to drop that so that you and the kids can go out fishing? She goes out there, and she looks at it, and she says, oh yeah, you have to pull this thing. And what she's talking about is, there's two of these, one on either side, so it's like a, so it's like a channel. And this thing's sticking through it, and right here is kind of a hammerhead piece of metal, and it's locked right into those teeth so it can't move. And she looks at that and she says, see, you have to pull it. Well, pulling it is what locked it in, so to release it you have to push. So I had my hand on the channel without thinking, and I pushed the rod, and there's no sign on it that says this is spring-loaded. And so what it did is it took this finger and it snapped it down on this unfinished sharp-edged metal, and it literally twisted it off. And the bone in there split like a, what do you call it, a wishbone? Yeah, in a second. So we're about 20 miles from the hospital. We went in, and I know how to avoid the insurance people. There's a little button, and I hit the button and went into the charge nurse, and she's sitting there in the ER, and she said, how can I help you? And I have a cloth over it, and I pull a cloth off, and I said, and she looked at it, and she went right back to her work. So I thought, okay. And after another minute or so, she looks up and she goes, let me see that again. And I show it to her. She says, we need to get you in the ER. So she puts me in the waiting room, or in the exam rooms. And a doctor comes in. You ladies still use those little tweezers, you know, to make your eye, yeah. In the ER, they have really big tweezers. And that doctor looks at it and he goes, oh, that's interesting. And he reaches into his little toolbox and he pulls out one of these big pair of tweezers, and he grabs a hold, it's tube. He grabs a hold of one, he goes, pops it right out. Now it hurts, you know. And he pops out the other one, and then he sticks my finger in a bottle of Betadine. It's a cleaning solution. Takes out a little scrub brush and no ether, yeah, just cleaning it. Now, why would he do that? That was painful. Well, because if he heard the report that it was on unfinished metal, and if there was just a little bit of metal in there, I had to come back with a golf ball on the end of my finger, and then we'd have taken more of it off. So, do the patient no harm does not mean pain. Oftentimes, no pain, no gain.
A lot of times when people have road rash, so motorcyclists that skid along the pavement, they will not put any local anesthetic or put them under to scrub that out of their body.
Yeah, right. I had blood poisoning. I was 16. Same thing right here. Doctor had me laid down, took about 8 or 9 little cotton balls, put alcohol on them, and he said, you don't want to look at this. So I looked at my mother, and then the searing pain, he just ripped across it and started squeezing all this black poison out of my leg. And he says, now you got to go home and do it for the next 7 days. or you can come back and I'd be glad to do it for you. And I thought, so the principle is two-part. Benefit the patient. What that doctor did to that patient was to benefit him. Tumors that go unchecked, we didn't have chemo, we didn't have any of the tools that we have now, was to help save the patient's life. And yes, it caused him pain, but hopefully the harm was not nearly as large as the benefit of being able to live beyond that. Now, the Hippocratic principle, the principle of paternalism, comes into direct conflict with the libertarian political philosophy. You will see both these names on your quiz. John Locke, the Englishman who invents it, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau, part of the French Revolution and spreading libertarianism across the continent. It does three things. Commands respect for the individual. Suddenly, you matter. Self-ownership gives you rights to be heard. Equality of moral worth of all persons. Now, these are in theoretical form, people. We're still trying to bring equality to all people, but the basis of libertarian political philosophy is there. And finally, provides a basis for social justice. So my mother's passing away down here. She's back in the Trinity Hospital, I think it was, no, she's in Memorial Hospital, which is over in Newport Richey before they moved it down to Trinity. And I'm coming home one night from visiting her, and I turn on the radio, and there's this interesting story about a fellow who had type 2 diabetes, and it was bad enough they had to remove his foot. So he went in for surgery that morning. They did everything correctly. They removed his foot. They got him ready to go into recovery, and one of the technicians went up to the x-ray screen thing and took the x-ray off and realized that someone had put it up backwards, and they took off the wrong foot. So now he had to go back in for another operation, and he ended up being footloose and fancy-free. That changed the way they do medicine here, and I'm pretty sure on the national level. So I had hernia surgery done probably 7 years ago. And just before I'm ready to go in, my physician shows up, stands in the doorway, says, "How we doing?" And I said, "Show me your black marker." And he lifts it right up. He says, "Which side?" And I said, "Here." And he goes, "Yes." And over here, he says, "No." We're not making that mistake again, because the patient has rights. There is a means of social justice. When they put me out and they went and did this to me, they really wanted to take, I've probably shared this before, they wanted to take the base of my tongue, my epiglottis, and I had a long talk with the doctor because they said, if we don't take it all your plumbing, he says, the odds are you're going to have cancer come back. And I said, I don't care. I want quality. Do not take my plumbing. If you got a question, you wake me up in the middle of surgery. And they kind of looked at me and I said, trust me, I'm going to hurt when I get up, and you're going to really hurt if you didn't do what I told you to do. The patient has rights, people. And I'll get to that in the legal form in a little bit. Go ahead.
If they had done that, would you have had a tracheotomy and
Yeah, and I had a little mic in there, and yeah, not what I wanted. In fact, I should probably tell you the rest of the story too. So if you ever go into major surgery, you bring more than one person.
Yep.
So the wife showed up, and then my best friend and his wife showed up, and then 45 minutes into surgery, I have 7 surgeons. It took about, 7-9 hours, because they take it piece by piece and they bag it. And Dr. Wolf comes out, my main surgeon. He says, we need to make a decision. He said, 5 of the 7 surgeons wants to take everything out. And he looks at my wife and says, I need for someone to make a decision. Well, you'll figure out in the law the closest one legally, so that would be my spouse. Her name's Barbara, and she kind of looked